Welcome to All About Art. My name is Alexandra, and I'm an art historian, curator, and writer. Within this podcast, topics relating to art history, cultural policy, the art sector, as well as a large range of other art-related topics will be covered. Conducting critical discussions, having entertaining exchanges, or just enjoying some relaxing chats, All About Art is where you'll find it all. Join me in exploring and developing cultural discourse. Welcome to another Art News Recap. Today, I will be covering February 2021. At the beginning of the month, the Art newspaper reported that the Netherlands are taking the lead in Europe's efforts to return artifacts to former colonies. They're adopting new guidelines and making it a priority to return colonial-era museum acquisitions. We are all looking at you, British Museum. This act of repatriation of artifacts is not only something that is immensely important in regards to objects stolen by the Nazi regime in the Second World War, for example, and that's something that I think a lot of people are very aware of, but also from other former colonial territories where cultural objects were taken or looted. For example, and this is explained within the article, the Netherlands had trading posts and colonies in Asia, Africa, North and South America, and that from the beginning of the 17th century. A report by the advisory committee of this movement within the Netherlands states that, and I'm going to direct quote, "This era is a time characterized by exploitation, violence, racism, and oppression." Ingrid van Engelshoven, the Minister of Education, Culture and Science, stated, and again I'm going to direct quote, "We must treat colonial collections with great sensitivity. There is no place in the Dutch state collection for cultural heritage objects that were acquired through theft." How can you disagree with that, honestly? And on that note, late last year, I had a Zoom call with a PhD student from Toronto who is researching this subject. Her research is incredibly important, and now she's actually making it available for everyone to educate themselves over Instagram. So there is a very easy way to access a lot of this information. I do suggest going and checking her out because I think that we can all learn something from her. And she's pretty easy to find. Her account is @crime&culture. And of course, I'll link it in the details of this podcast episode. Speaking of museums, another article in the art newspaper that I wanted to talk about is on the topic of how museums, and other art institutions to be honest, have cut their staff to save money. But the question remains of what will they do when visitors return and the institutions need their staff back? The author of the article starts out already talking about how, as an art historian, he feels that after a year of this, he is reaching the limit of how effective he can be without actually seeing any art. And I definitely do not disagree. But the sad thing is, even though some of us can work from home, when in-person art viewing isn't possible, it does result in institutions prioritizing their bottom line. The National Trust is making more than 700 staff redundant, while Tate wants to close more than 400 posts. Being both in the UK and in Austria during all of this, I feel like I've really noticed this much more in the UK. And statistically, when looking at income streams of museums in both countries, the UK receives about 30% of their total income from government funding, and in Austria, it totals to around 60%. Now, maybe don't quote me on this or take my word as fact, because this is based on a case study that I did for some research in my master's program at Goldsmiths recently, and I was comparing 3 different institutions. The MoMA, the Museum of Modern Art in New York, I was comparing Tate Modern, and I was comparing the MUMOK in Vienna, Austria. So it could really very well differ from museum to museum, depending on their policies. But this could be a reason why I'm seeing it happen more in the UK compared to Austria. Another reason could be because I'm more professionally active in the UK than Austria. So I would love to hear feedback, or if you're in one of the 2 countries or in other countries and you've experienced something like this. But either way, it's sad. I have not been made redundant myself, but I have friends who have experienced this, and it has all hit us really, really hard. Now onto something a little bit more upbeat. The Uffizi, which for those who don't know, it is a museum in Florence, Italy, and they have acquired their first street artwork. It is a mixed media piece that was donated by the UK artist Endless. And if you want to see the image, I have posted it on my Instagram, so you can head over there and have a look while you're listening. This piece combines a photograph of UK artist duo Gilbert and George, as well as an image of the artist himself reading a magazine with an image on the cover that is the artist's version of the Calvin Klein campaign with Mark Wahlberg. That was quite a hit in the 90s. On the topic of his work coming into the Uffizi collection, the artist said, direct quote, "It is an honor that my work has been added to the collection of the Uffizi galleries. Artists who come from a street art background are rarely recognized by the most prestigious museums. Street art, after all, is a form of art in itself and is historically significant." Of course, everyone can acknowledge that Banksy, for example, is extremely important when it comes to art historical discourse. And if we think back to, when was it, 2018 or something like that, when he shredded his lovely girl with a balloon, that wasn't just an art market stunt, in my opinion. I think that it was also very art historically significant when you think about different stages of an artwork, different types of authorship and collaboration, and the circumstances in which different art pieces come to exist. And I actually wrote an essay on it for my art history course. So yeah, it's extremely significant, and it's really, really interesting to talk about. From a cultural policy point of view, street art is public art, and something like that cannot be underestimated in its importance. But there are a lot of different conversations surrounding this, so maybe that might be an interesting topic for another time. It's also something that I would actually like to research more, with the intersections of, I guess, what you could call mainstream art, or if I were to use some slightly outdated terms, but they're still used in this context, but it's low art and high art, and what defines them and why. And also how street art, which by many in the past would have been put into the low art category, has indeed intersected with the high art world, as I mentioned before, with Banksy as one of the best examples. I'm using these terms loosely, like low art, high art, but I think that we can all agree that there are different sectors within the arts that we categorize various mediums in. And there are so many things that factor into that, like education, class, elitism, exclusivity, money, institutionalism, gatekeeping. I mean, some of these things are synonymous with each other, but there's a lot more that goes into it too. So if you have any insights on this, do let me know, because I'm really, really interested in researching this further. The last article that I want to talk about today is from Art News, and it is about the US House of Representatives. They have a curator, and the curator of the art collection is seeking $25,000 to repair what was vandalized during the attack on the Capitol on January 6th, 2021. The curator intends to petition for funds to repair 8 objects displayed outside the chamber doors, many of which were damaged after being doused by fire extinguishers when pro-Trump rioters stormed the Capitol building. Oh yes, America, land of the great. There is actually an exhibition going on in Vienna at the moment called MAGA Meets Marie, and it's by Filipino artist Stephanie Misa, and it kind of assembles different visual things that are associated with MAGA, like banners, hats, chandeliers that reference QAnon, Proud Boys, and Marie Antoinette as well. It's kind of a critical engagement with racism and with these very problematic political themes that are happening in the United States. And it's really interesting because my friend and colleague, Paula Marszalek, she is the co-founder of C20, the association that her and I have in Vienna. And she actually helped organize this exhibition, and she posted about it on her Facebook. She created an event, and her account ended up being blocked and deleted. And I actually am going to have to ask her for an update on that because she just lost her Facebook account. And she wasn't doing anything. She wasn't writing about anything in particular. She was just saying this art exhibition is on in Vienna. And I guess the algorithm or whatever it was that filters through different content and vocabulary and didn't agree with what she was posting. And instead of deleting the event, it blocked her entire account. So I would, again, all of these things I keep saying, I would love people to reach out and tell me more about, what they know about how Facebook deals with censoring different things, because context is very important. And this was an art exhibition. This isn't some form of American politics, or, of course it's a commentary on politics, but there is a difference, and context is extremely important in so many things. Context and nuance and education and words, all of these things are very important. So I don't really think that it was very appropriate that her account just completely got deleted. But again, I would love to hear what people think or what people know about how these things happen and how these things get decided. But returning back to the topic of the House of Representatives and the fact that the curator is seeking $25,000 to repair what was vandalized, I actually did learn something new about materials, because apparently the stuff that is in the fire extinguisher contains a yellow dye, and this can discolor the surface it touches. So marble is something that would really be affected by this. And in addition, because yes, it does get weirder, during the attack, rioters used aerosols like bear spray and pepper spray, which also left a harmful residue on the art. The building also has had a lot of damage. For those who have actually watched some of the videos of what happened, you can see that there's a lot of damage being done to the outside and the inside of the building. And in response to the aftermath, some have even discussed leaving some of the damage intact as a sort of historical marker of the event. This also reminds me of the statue of Edward Colston being pulled down and thrown into the water in Bristol. I will include a link to info on that as well, although it did happen in June of 2020, so not that relevant for February art news, but if you want to read more on that, the information is here. So my thoughts on this at the moment are, if it were up to me, it depends on the type of art that got harmed. If it is representative of someone like a slave trader, no, you know what? Don't repair it. We really have developed as a society, and we're doing so every day with every conversation and every decision. And we have the power to make the decisions and allow certain things to be condoned and other things not to be. Making a decision that shows no tolerance towards racism, colonialism, sexism, or that shows that we are doing our best to acknowledge and learn from our past, that is a way in which the arts and cultural industry can make a difference. And we have the power to ignite change. But you know what? That is just my 2 cents. I would love to hear your opinions on this, if you agree or disagree, and also tell me why. Because I know that a lot of people will also be of the opinion that leaving certain things in place, that it is a means of still being educated and remembering the mistakes made by our societies in the past. And I think that that's also really important, because erasure and just acting like something didn't happen can then also lead to repeating the same mistakes. But I mentioned this earlier in the podcast, that context and education is very, very important. So having a statue up just in the middle of the square of a slave trader, that doesn't really send the right message. But as I said, just my 2 cents. Would love to hear your feedback. And with that, I am going to end the podcast episode. And as always, thank you so much for listening. And that is it for today on All About Art. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave me a rating or a review, as it helps more people discover the show. Also, feel free to share with your friends, or if you share on social media, tag me and get in touch. Thank you so much for listening.